In part 1 of this series, Why Single-Sideband CB, we introduced two types of citizen band two-way radios: standard citizens band and single-sideband citizens band. These two types, plus numerous other consumer and amateur class radios, are discussed in our book, Radio Free Earth, Community Preparedness and Two-Way Radios. And the one we chose as a starting point for those who are new to the topic of disaster communications is the single-sideband CB. The driving criteria for this choice is range. With single-sideband CB, you have both near and far. And in this second part in this series, How Single-Sideband CB Works, you're going to see how they send and receive messages across far distances. For this reason, we'll begin with the best-known type of CB operator, long-haul truckers. By current estimates, roughly 1/2 of all long-haul truckers still use a CB radio today, along with cellular and satellite services. Their CB of choice is a standard 40-channel CB, which does not have single-sideband capability. However, to illustrate essential single-sideband concepts, we need to begin with a very simple standard CB radio as the starting point for our discussion. Here we have our example 40-channel CB, such as those favored by long-haul truckers. Yes, it's pretty simple. To make it a single-sideband CB, however, we'll need a little more room for additional knobs and buttons. Now we have 3 new buttons and a knob. The buttons are for selecting the transmission modes, of which there are 3. The AM mode is used by all CBs. With AM mode, the range is under 5 miles. The FCC only allows 4 watts of transmit power. This is why the AM mode is only useful for near communications, which is fine for long-haul truckers. But for survival, you want the far range of a single-sideband CB. For that, we'll use 2 other mode buttons. One is the upper sideband, USB, and the other is the lower sideband, LSB. When the radio is in upper sideband mode, it is transmitting with 12 watts of power, as opposed to the 4 watts of power allowed with the AM mode. However, what gives a radio like this a range of over 1,000 miles is the single-sideband mode. Simply put, it is the most efficient way to transmit a message. The same holds true for the lower sideband as well. And this is not the only thing that the upper and lower sidebands have in common. The other is the need for frequent fine-tuning. For this, a clarifier is used, and frequent clarifier adjustments are often necessary. This is why single-sideband CBs are not appealing to long-haul truckers. They can ill afford the distraction of having to tune a clarifier and drive at the same time. And this brings us back to AM mode and how it works. A CB, or single-sideband CB in AM mode, transmits a 3-part signal: the carrier, which determines the frequency, and the upper and lower sidebands, which carry the audio. AM has 2 sidebands. One is the upper sideband. The other is the lower sideband. It is important to note that both the upper and lower AM sidebands carry the same identical audio. The process begins when you key the mic and speak into your microphone. Your voice signal is then amplified and conditioned, after which the radio can then modulate it depending on your choice of mode. When you select the AM mode, the amplified and conditioned signal from the microphone is modulated, after which a complete 3-part signal can then go out over the air as an AM transmission. Now, let's see how this works with single-sideband. When you select the USB mode, the amplified and conditioned signal is modulated and will eventually become the upper sideband. What happens is that the carrier wave is created, then removed, leaving the 2 sidebands. After that, the radio then removes the unwanted sideband. What makes this powerful is that with AM modulation, the carrier and the sidebands each consume 4 watts of power. However, with single sideband modulation, the carrier wave and 1 sideband are removed. At that point, the combined 8 watts of power used by the carrier wave and 1 sideband are then used to create a single sideband with a total of 12 watts of power. Hence the FCC rule for 12 watts of peak envelope power for single sideband CB. This process is likewise repeated when choosing the lower sideband mode. And the concentration of power is the same, so it's all good. This is why a single sideband CB is your first and best low-cost two-way radio for survival communications. Now that you've seen how single sideband works, you know 1/2 of the reason for the far range of a single sideband CB. The other is something folks like to call shooting skip, and you'll learn all about it in Part 3 of this series, Making Single Sideband CB Work for You. Until the next time, remember this: Radio Free Earth will pay for itself many times over with your initial radio purchases. And the sooner you begin, the more you'll save. To purchase our book, Radio Free Earth, online, visit amazon.radiofreeearth.org. We offer 3 different editions: a low-cost black and white edition and 2 collector-grade, all-color special editions. For the Radio Free Earth team, this is Marshall Masters. And if things go sideways, we'll catch you on the 40.